One town committee is looking for ways to reduce nitrogen in the town's waterways. A local park project is delayed, and some cool beach gear will be available early next year. These stories and more on this episode of Barnstable Today. It's Friday, December 12th, 2014. I'm Sarah Mannel. Barnstable could be the next town to use shellfish to reduce nitrogen loading in the town's waterways. The Comprehensive Water and Nutrient Management Plan Citizens Advisory Committee discussed the method during its meeting this week. During a portion of the meeting, Josh Reitzman from the Cooperative Extension and Sea Grant explained the process.
One of the misconceptions we found early on is some people think that they operate as a sponge. You know, you put a quahog into Katuitt Bay and a couple days later you pull it out and it's absorbed X amount of nutrients. And unfortunately, that's not the case. They work more as a grazer, and over time, as they filter feed, that's what they do. They filter feed plants out of the water. They derive nutrition from those plants, and those plants have, sucked up nutrients from the water, and that nutrition then ends up in the shellfish and can then be harvested. So it's kind of a grazer effect rather than a sponge effect. And oysters don't have a very complex life. They have a pretty boring life. They sit on the bottom and they pump water in and they pump water out. And in the process, they're really good filters. They're really good at what they do. And this is just a diagram to show that, particulates in the water, they're very effective at pulling them out. In some cases, 90 to 100% of the particulates that go through an oyster are filtered out. And it's not a perfect process. They still do produce waste. They produce fecal material and other particles that end up on the bottom, which is kind of what those brown particles are supposed to represent. But a lot of the actual phytoplankton will end up out of the water. And they also, their main nitrogen metabolite is ammonia as well. So,
Reitzman also talked about how towns can begin to select possible sites for shellfish grants.
I usually tell people how you would go about finding a site or the permitting process. The town is the first authority. There's a lot of homework you would need to do to look at a site and try to get a site permitted through the town. There's all sorts of things like the water classification. DMF does a very good job of classifying waters, and you want to be in approved waters to harvest. There's user conflicts, there's protected species, there's many things you'd have to look at before you get approved to do a farming operation on a given spot of water. And if you made it through the town approval, then the state, basically DMF, or the federal level, Army Corps of Engineers, would be able to review your proposal as well. So it can be challenging, but it's not insurmountable. We have a growing industry, so it's still done on a regular basis. And just a quick overview of how shellfish are grown. It usually starts with a hatchery. They're very technically oriented to spawning shellfish and getting the very little ones through the larval phases. And your typical farmer or town propagation program would start with seed. These are seed quahogs. And you may have them in a nursery system. The town uses upwellers as a nursery system. It's very effective for large amounts of animals in a small area. And then inevitably you move to a grow-out phase, which is out on the water at your aquaculture or propagation site where they're tended through to a size where they can be harvested. So, for example, quahogs are typically grown under nets. This provides predator protection so that crabs and things don't come in and steal all of your clams. And they're usually set out in runs like this. These are runs already established. And they do like sandy bottom, mud. They may grow in mud, but they don't like it nearly as much. And they're a little bit more picky than oysters. They like higher salinity and cooler temps generally for good growth. Growing oysters, there's a number of ways. The simplest and the oldest method is you just put them on the bottom, usually after they're nursed to a certain size where they're a little bit resistant to predation. Then you might move up to rack and bag. These are simple rebar racks with plastic mesh bags that hold the oysters, or they can be made out of PVC as well. Gets them up off the bottom, away from predators a little bit, and it also allows them to have good water flow below and beneath them and above, so they have good access to food. cages, just another variation to put these plastic bags in and get them up off the bottom a little bit. Trays, these are actually from Scudder's, where Tom and his crew are doing a good job growing oysters. Just another variation, and oyster growers have gotten very good at adapting different techniques. So surface gear is another potential. It can be suspended from surface lines like these lantern nets here, or they may be floating bags. They may be floated in big lines like this to get them congregated into a certain area. Or there's even floating cages now to be tended by boats that could be set out in lines and allow oysters to be up near the surface where there's just a greater amount of food, especially in deeper water, and can be a very effective strategy. So,
Wrightsman says growing shellfish have other benefits as well, including adding jobs to the local economy and improving habitat for other marine life. The Citizens Advisory Committee will continue the discussion during later meetings in hopes of presenting a pilot program to Town Council. Well, more time to complete the playground project at Veterans Park is granted. According to the original parameters of the grant, work would have had to be complete by mid-December. Director of Leisure Services Patty Machado says less than ideal conditions for installing pour-and-play material and a problem with customs on the West Coast threatened the project's completion date.
And they said the last dead date was going to be October 15th. But then we got some really good weather and warm weather, so they left it open. So we were hoping that we could get everything completed so that we could do the pour and play, which is basically the rubber surface-like element that goes on top and below the swing sets where we have an area for special needs or handicapped people or people with mobility issues or in a wheelchair. They'll be able to get in and out. If you've been to Luke's Love, then that it's the same type of flooring that goes down. And then we have the sand section, but we had two situations that happened. First was the pour and play. We knew it was going to get cold, but then we had a problem getting all the equipment in because in LA, customs stopped our equipment coming in off the boat, and so we weren't able to get the equipment in time as well. So we were hoping things would get fixed out there quickly enough, but then the federal government said no, and that put us behind even more because you had to get the equipment down before you can do any of the footing, the base. So we were able to get an extension, and we weren't the only ones. Everyone that has requested an extension has been able to get the extension. So with that, we're able to complete the playground, and our hopes is to have it done by April 30th. We just need to warm up enough, and we will finish putting all the equipment in because the ground's still not frozen. So we will get the rest of the equipment in within the next 2 weeks. However, we will not do the footing until after it warms up, and we have to have 3 to 5 days of warm enough weather. It has to be over 40 degrees, and it has to stay over 40 degrees, and the ground cannot be frozen in any way.
Machado says the playground will remain closed until the pour and play flooring is ready to go. The playground is expected to be open next spring. Residents will soon be able to purchase t-shirts and sweatshirts from their favorite town beach. Director of Leisure Services Patty Machado says it's something they've been thinking about for some time.
Well, everybody in our office had some input. John Gleason, who's fabulous, put this whole thing together. It was his idea and his brainstorm. And we've tried other shirts in the past, but we've had a lot of people come into the bathhouses and ask. And I know Sandy Neck's been selling paraphernalia for quite a while, so it's kind of nice that we'll be adding our own, and it'll be for Craigville, Colville's, Dowses, Loop, and Millway. Those are the sites that we're starting with, and we'll see how they go. We had a really fabulous response actually on our Facebook page so far.
And the beach gear will be available to order in January. Well, be sure to tune in to our hour-long news program Barnstable This Morning, weekdays at 7 a.m. On Monday's show, we will chat with Town Manager Tom Lynch, Superintendent of Schools Dr. Mary Schakowsky, plus we'll have all the news and information you need. For Barnstable Today, I'm Sarah Mantle.